The first time I met Mr. Bates was at Julie's office. He came to our foster home to adopt a son. Julie was a good foster mother and I loved being with her and my foster cousins. So suddenly getting your life turned 180 degrees caused me a lot of trouble. And that's where this story begins. Mr. Bates and his wife lived in the countryside, close to the mountains, and they wanted nothing more than to complete their family. So, I reluctantly said goodbye to my old family and moved into this big house in a remote area to live with my new one. The house was even bigger inside. Mr. Bates was holding my trunk and we walked up to a room. The door was closed. Mr. Bates knocked on it and the woman in a feeble voice replied,
"Come right in, dear."
It was my first time meeting my new mom, so I was nervous. I looked at Mr. Bates and he gave me a weird smile.
Go ahead, open the door.
We went in. The first thing I noticed was the damp ceiling filling the room with a musty smell. Then my eyes went to the corner. There sat a skinny woman in a pale yellow dress by the window. The wind from the window made her thin hair dangle.
Come here. Don't be afraid.
I got closer to her. She stretched her arms out to me, but I hesitated.
Don't be afraid, Billy. Come to Mommy.
Honey, his name is Joshua.
Oh, yes. My brain. Sit down here, Joshua. This is your new home.
I sat down and she watched me with an uncomfortable smile. Her eyes were wide like a night owl. And then Mr. Bates came and sat beside me. He kept his hand on my shoulder and said,
You will have no problem here, Joshua. We can give you everything. But in return, we want you to be our son.
I looked at him with teary eyes thinking how lucky I was all of the sudden. But in reality, that was far from the truth. They took me to a big room and that's when I started sensing trouble. The room was filled with kids' toys and had a big Mickey Mouse painted on the walls.
This is your room. Do you like it? Yeah.
I couldn't tell them how odd it was for the room of a 12-year-old. Even the furniture was that of a toddler's size. I could barely fit in the bed, but the Bates didn't seem bothered. They just grinned at me the entire time without blinking.
Now, who's ready for a bath, huh?
Sorry, what?
Take off your clothes. I'll give you a bath.
Excuse me?
Miss Bates suddenly stopped smiling and screamed,
Take them off! Now! You always listen to Mommy!
Mr. Bates, what's going on? I'm not a kid, I can bathe. Just do what your mother says, son. You don't want her getting angry. What the hell? No way I'm letting your weird wife bathe me.
Billy boy, don't be so moody now.
Who the hell is Billy? What's happening here?
Miss Bates grabbed my shoulders and pulled me close to her face.
You are Billy. From now on, you'll be like our son.
That's when it hit me. By our son, they meant someone else. Suddenly, my eyes went to the bedstand and I saw a photograph. The Bates were there standing with a toddler in their arms.
Look, I'm not Billy, I'm Joshua. Please, just send me back to Julie. I didn't bring you here just to send you back.
I think he will feel better with the pacifier. Bring it, honey.
What? No!
Miss Bates held my arms and Mr. Bates opened a nearby drawer. Man, that woman had inhuman strength. She looked lean, but her grasp was like that of a python. Mr. Bates came back with a blue shiny pacifier, like the kind that is used to calm little kids. He shoved it inside my mouth and I gagged, but he kept pushing it up against my lips so I couldn't spit it out. After a moment of struggling and revulsion, I passed out. When I opened my eyes, I found myself tied to a chair. In front of me was a kid's table with a bowl of cereal and a feeding bottle. My clothes were gone and I was changed into a diaper. A freaking diaper. I couldn't talk as the pacifier was still inside my mouth. It tasted like it hadn't been cleaned in months. I was trying my best not to vomit. They even tied a bib around my neck. I was dressed up like a toddler while being a 12-year-old boy. It was a nightmare. I tried to shake my body when I heard a sound coming from behind.
Happy birthday, dear Billy.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Mr. and Mrs. Bates placed a cake in front of me. It had a number candle, 3. So, this is what they wanted from me? To be a 3-year-old? Mr. Bates removed the pacifier from my mouth, and I breathed unimpeded after a long time.
Please, I want to go home. I'm not Billy. Please, just let me go home.
But they kept on singing and clapping like maniacs. I had to blow out the candles, because after a point I accepted my fate. No one will know about this. I'm stuck here forever now.
I'm gonna release your hands, Billy, so you can cut the cake. Now, don't try to do anything wrong, okay?
I nodded my head. What else could I do? Mr. Bates freed my hands. Suddenly, the doorbell rang 3 to 4 times continuously. Whoever was at the door didn't want to wait. I flung the cake on Miss Bates and jumped from the chair to run.
No! He's running away! Stop him! Stop him! I want him!
Mr. Bates chased me and I hurried down the stairs. I had just one chance. One opportunity to get everything I ever wanted. Freedom! I lunged at the main door and opened it with all of my strength, yelling at the top of my voice.
Help me! Please!
On the other side of the door stood Julie with 2 cops. I fainted in her arms. 3 days after I woke up in my foster home after having had a fever, Julie said I mumbled in my sleep for help and screamed I'm not Billy over and over. The story went that Mr. and Mrs. Bates had a son named Billy. When he was 3 years old, he passed away. And since then, the duo became psychos. Before me, they had tried to adopt 2 other boys around my age and tortured them into being their long-lost toddler. After I left, Julie got a call from the officials at the court about this freak husband and wife. Thank God she arrived before the Bates made things even worse. After that, I never agreed to adoption. It's better to be a foster kid than to be someone's dead son.
When I was 8 years old, my parents took in someone named Julio as a foster kid. I think my parents just got greedy and wanted to turn foster care into a profitable business or something, because they hardly did any background checks on the kids they sheltered. I remember the day Julio arrived at my house. He was small for his age, skinny but had a big head with messy hair. He also had some cuts and bruises on his face, so he'd definitely seen some bad days. He wore an oversized tattered jacket which smelled terrible. Of all the kids to come to my house, he looked the most defeated, yet strangely suspicious. I've never known what happened with Julio's parents or why he was brought into foster care, but it couldn't have been good for sure. I went to shake his hand. "Welcome, Julio. I'm Andy." He eyed me from top to bottom without blinking once, and then walked away. My dad snapped seeing his don't care attitude and screamed,
"Hey, you get back here right now! When my son speaks to you, you answer, understand?"
He was putting Julio in his place, at least from his perspective.
"You are nothing in this house compared to our son, got it?"
"Dad, I told him, leave him alone." Julio cut me off. "No, he's right. I'm sorry." Suddenly his demeanor changed, as though he knew this was precisely what he should say to keep my father quiet.
"Looks like you're a smart boy. Come, I'll show you your room."
Julio and I shared a room. My parents bought these bunk beds to save space. I slept at the top and Julio slept at the bottom. That night after dinner, I went to bed early. Julio just sat near the window, just watching the empty streets. I fell asleep, but was interrupted by a sudden sound. It was this clipping sound, not too loud, but hammering. I opened my eyes and saw a pair of eyes behind my feet. I could tell it was Julio. He was climbing up the bunk ladder just enough to reveal the top of his head. His cold eyes gave me the creeps. "Julio, do you need anything?" "I wanted to ask you a question, Andy. What do you do when you can't sleep?" I don't know. Try to divert my mind, I guess?" "We aren't that different then." He climbed up slowly and sat on my bed next to my legs. Want to see how I divert my mind? Julio started biting his nails. The clipping sound that his teeth made while ripping off every last bite of his fingernails made my skin crawl. He then showed me his hands. Each finger was covered with a red rash, and the skin around the nails didn't look good. They were swollen and filled with pus. Oh my God, you must be in pain. You don't know anything about pain. You're just a stupid boy who got lucky. He went back to his bed, terrorizing me the entire night. The more time I spent with Julio, the more I realized he wasn't a normal kid. There's a dark side in Julio which he hides from the world. One afternoon, I happened to come home early from school. I called out to my mom.
I'm taking a shower, honey. There's pasta for you in the fridge. Have at it and give some to Julio as well.
I ran to my room, but Julio wasn't there. I figured he must be in the backyard, so I checked there next. Outside, Julio was standing on a cardboard box, staring into my mom's bathroom. There was a sick smile on his face that I'll never forget. I wanted to scream at him, but something choked me up. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the loss of innocence upon realizing what Julio was up to. Suddenly, he noticed me and his smile faded. An angry expression took over and he got down from the box. He walked right back into the house without any regret. It was like he was doing something important and I had ruined it all. I followed him back to my room. I wanted to punch him in the face.
You sick freako! Shh! I think your mom's coming.
My mom came to our room with a fresh towel wrapped around her head, wearing a bathrobe.
I forgot to tell you guys. Your dad and I will be going out for dinner tonight. You two better behave and stay at home.
Sure, Mrs. Vermont. Have a good time with your husband. He had that same creepy smile from before. I felt so dirty around him. How could an 11-year-old be so distorted, so rotten? That night, my parents left and Julio got busy watching movies in the living room. That's when I took the chance. The only thing he brought with him was an old tattered suitcase. He kept it under the bed and guarded it with his life. I tiptoed back to my room, taking this perfect opportunity to go through his stuff. There were a few old t-shirts, a pair of trousers, and a small notebook. As I opened the notebook, my palms got sweaty. I found two $50 bills inside the notebook and a hospital ID. The name of the hospital was Serene Mental Institution, with a mugshot of Julio looking more evil than ever. His date of birth was April 22nd, 1990. Making him at least 23 to 24 years old. And under the patient status, he was labeled as extremely violent. My throat went dry and I could barely breathe. The foster kid whom my parents brought home is a full-grown adult. He only looks like a child. I looked out to the living room. Julio was still sitting on the couch watching TV. I locked the door of my room and called my parents. They told me to sit tight and that they'd be home soon with the cops. Suddenly, the doorknob started twisting, followed by Julio's voice. Why's the door locked, Andy? This is my room too! Open the door, Andy, now! I didn't answer him at that point because I was scared to death. That's when the banging started. I said open it! Open the door, you little brat! I know the truth, Julio. The cops will be here soon! Just as I mentioned this, everything went silent. A few seconds later, Julio passed a handwritten note through the gap under the door, and I heard his footsteps running away. This is what he wrote. You know, there's a lot more like me.
I grew up in a foster home after my parents passed away at a young age. I suffered from anxiety since then, and needless to say, foster care doubled it up. When I was 9 years old, I was sent to a new foster home. The house was in a sketchy neighborhood, and it was run by a woman named Zelda. She was pretty mean and made us kids do all the chores. Apart from me, she had 3 more kids who were also boys. We lived opposite of a bizarre middle-aged man who always behaved weirdly in the presence of children. He wore trousers with suspenders and no shirts on, ever. We all shared one bathroom with 2 bunk beds, and whenever we slid open the curtain, we always saw him sitting on his balcony holding binoculars over his eyes. He would watch over us all the time, making it excessively creepy. Now, Zelda worked a day job, but even then she couldn't make ends meet. This made her try out new ways to earn extra cash now and then. Zelda never cared about risks. All she cared about was the money. One day, waking up, I heard Zelda talking to someone. I was on breakfast duty when I heard an extra pair of footsteps inside the house. Whoever Zelda was talking to had now entered our house. Out of curiosity, I peeked in and saw it was sketchy Lenny. Surprisingly, he was dressed nicely today, but his scary face remained the same. Zelda sat him down on the couch and called out to us.
Boys, there's someone here to meet you. Come out!
We all lined up following her call. Lenny's face lightened up with a disturbing joy the moment he saw us. It was the first time we were all meeting him face to face. Lenny not only looked even worse close up, but also had this uncomfortable habit of licking his lips after every sentence.
So, this is Lenny. He's going to be your new friend, and he's going to spend some time with you guys from now on.
Zelda, what about breakfast? Yeah, we could use some food before all this bullcrap early in the morning.
Mind your tongue, Thomas!
Thomas was the most vocal one among us, but the moment Zelda scolded him, Lenny cut her off, saying, "What a gentleman. I like him already." Lenny got up from the couch and brought his face real close to Thomas. His eyes widened as he looked right into Thomas's eyes and said, "It'll be fun." He quickly took out a $20 bill and, tossing it to Zelda, grabbed Thomas's hand and started pulling him into the basement. What? What's happening? Where are you taking me? Zelda! Stop! Leave me alone, you freak! Lenny continued to drag him, and Zelda didn't even try to stop him. We three watched in complete horror, having no clue what was happening. We heard the basement door lock, and then everything went silent. 15 minutes later, Thomas came out, and to our shock, he was fine. There was nothing wrong with his physical appearance, but his face looked traumatized. Lenny left, and I knew that this was just the beginning. That night, when we asked Thomas if Lenny did something inappropriate, Thomas said, "Well, he didn't put his hands on me, if that's what you're all asking." Then what happened? Don't lie to us, you look super pale, dude. Thomas said that after Lenny made him sit on the mattress, he asked him to take off his shoes, revealing his bare feet. After that, Lenny went on taking several snaps of Thomas's feet on his smartphone, and then left. He took pictures of your feet? What a sick psycho! 2 days later, Lenny arrived once again. This time, he had 4 cheese corn dogs in his hands. Again, he tossed a $20 bill to Zelda and made us all stand in line. One by one, he handed us the corn dogs and asked us to eat them. "Enjoy them, kids. Uncle Lenny loves corn dogs too." As awkward and uncomfortable as it was, we had no other choice than to follow his instructions. While we 4 boys ate corn dogs, Lenny watched us like a hawk. He licked his lips 1,000 times and smirked in between. When he left, I took a long shower to wash off his eyes from me. That night, I talked to Zelda. "When is Lenny gonna stop coming here?"
Well, this isn't your house, so you don't get to decide. Now go to your room. Feel lucky that he only pays to watch you guys.
We couldn't go to the cops because there was no physical injury to report, and if we went away, we knew Zelda would make our lives a living hell once the cops left. So, we tolerated the freak for a few more months. One day, I was cutting the grass in the backyard when I saw Lenny talking to a little boy down the sidewalk. The boy was younger than me and looked lost. Lenny's predatory smile didn't escape my eyes. Within the next 2 seconds, Lenny was holding the kid's hand and taking him into his apartment. I was pretty sure what had happened. He tricked the naive child, claiming to offer him help, but I knew what his true intentions were. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to me. I rushed inside the house and told my other brothers. Thank God Zelda was out grocery shopping. We immediately called 911 and told them about Lenny and this little kid. In the next 5 minutes, cop cars flooded the street outside. It turned out that the little kid was the grandkid of the retired town mayor, and he had been separated from his parents on his way to the park. Somehow, he ended up near our house and thus bumped into Lenny. When the cops knocked on Lenny's door and asked him about the child, the freak straight away denied seeing any kid. Their suspicion only grew stronger and they barged into his house. The little kid was lying on the couch with his socks and shoes removed and the first few buttons of his shirt opened. The kid said Lenny was helping him to be comfortable until his parents arrived. I hope no one ever tells him what the freak really had in mind for him. Long story short, Lenny was arrested, and because the kid was the son of a powerful family, sketchy Lenny is still rotting in jail. Having parents and family is the biggest strength in the world, and who can vouch for it better than a foster kid?